Hi, welcome to today's class period. If you're watching this later, I forgot to record the first 5 minutes of class. Basically, all we've done so far is I've explained things very badly, and we've started creating a portfolio site. And we're going to do it again because of some internet connections, so you're in luck if you're watching this later. Okay? Alright, so basically, I'm just going to start back here again. We've created a folder for this class inside of your Google Drive. And once you are inside of this area, you're going to right-click in the white space, choose More, or hover over More rather, and then click on Google Sites. Sorry, not slides, Sites. It will automatically create for you based on the default template. Ooh, template gallery. What is that? That's new. Ooh, interesting. Shiny. Nope, we'll come back to that later. I'll come back to that later. Okay. It will create, based on the default template, a site that we're going to use. So the first thing you want to do is in this area that says Enter Site Name, put something like, so for mine would be Brumbaugh's Portfolio, or something similar to that. When you click away from this, it will automatically change this title up here as well. So I'm going to pull up the one that I was working on earlier. Let this load. There we go. So here's the one that I created earlier, and you're basically going to do the same thing, except you are not going to have the same links up here at the top, and I will walk through putting the links in just a minute. But the next thing that you're going to do is, after you've put the title in here, in the center box, put something like Drafting Portfolio in. A lot of dinging. After you have Drafting Portfolio in place, or actually for your architecture portfolio, you'll click on this box over here next to Layouts. It's the one that has the mock-up of one picture, a dark gray line, and a light gray line. It'll put this in, and you'll put a small blurb about yourself in this section. Title it About Me, something about myself, something like that. And then sometime within the next week or two, put a picture of yourself here. It can be your Bitmoji if you want, but something that represents you and is of you and is identifiable. Although I should probably change my Bitmoji since I no longer have a beard. And then finally, go through and choose one of the themes over here that you like and a color that you like. And I will give you until 1:50 to complete that. There we go. So the next thing that I want you guys to do is to hop over to the Pages tab up here between Insert and Themes. Now, if you have me for other classes, you're already going to have some stuff in here. For this specific class,
we can't see your screen.
Good point, thank you. There we go. So all I did was clicked on the Pages tab over here, and yours will probably only have Home unless you've already done this with me in the last day or two. What we're going to click on, or what we're going to create first, is a new page for architecture. So you're going to click the little plus down here and create an architecture page. And then below that, whoops, no, I don't want to make that home page. I want my home page to be a home page. There you go. Below, if you click on the kebab, which is the official proper name for the 3 stacked dots in Google Items, and choose Add Subpage. We're going to make a few subpages for the architecture class. So the first one is going to be projects. And then we'll create another one called resources. Whoops. So I accidentally made mine a subpage of a subpage. If you do that, all you have to do is click and drag it out. There we go. Then you're going to create another subpage called sketches. Yes.
Your screen is like so blurry for me that I don't even really see where you're at. So.
What is it? No, I don't want you to be full screen. I just want to see what you all see. Is that better? Well, that.
Not really.
Okay, so are you at least in the section where it says pages? Right here?
Yeah, but it doesn't bring up any of that stuff.
Right. These. Okay. So since you hadn't created one with me before, all you should have is home. The first thing we did is at the bottom of that section there is a circle with a plus in it. When you hover over that, it spins out into new page. And we're going to create one called architecture.
Alright, thank you.
And well, let's say, and then below that, we're going to, so not below that, but in the same, when you hover over the word architecture, you'll see the kebab show up on the right-hand side. You'll click on that and choose Add Subpage. And it will pop up with this little box that says New Subpage, and you can type a name for it. When that happens, you're going to make 4 of them total. The first one, and it doesn't matter which order they're in right now, we can move it. But we need one called Projects, one called Resources, one called Sketches, and then a last one called Client Work. So Client Work. Because you didn't turn it in. Ow. Okay. Once that is complete, then we're done adding things to this for the time being. What you're going to do is click on the blue Publish box in the upper right-hand corner. If you have published it in another class for me, do not do that. When you click Publish, it will bring up the Publish Settings box. And as long as this upper left-hand corner was filled out, it will have filled in some text inside where it says web address. As long as there is text there, go ahead and click the Publish button. Because I've done it already, my screen does not show that right now. Just to save complication, I'm going to assume that Google has done what it's supposed to, and it's set so that I can view the link by default, which it should be. So now you're going to click on the icon at the top. So you have Publish, a kebab, a gear, a person with a plus, and then one looks kind of like a paperclip. You're going to click the one that looks like a paperclip, and then we're going to copy the link that it shows you. Come back to Canvas, and let's see here. Portfolio link collector. Let me actually find the link for that. Form, live form, copy, close, enter. Okay. Go back to Canvas and refresh your modules page, and you should now have Portfolio Link Collector. Even if you have done this for me in another class, go ahead and fill it out for this one as well. It will take you to a Google form, because as you all know, I'm nuts about Google Forms. You'll choose Architecture for the class, and you'll paste your link in here. The reason I want you to go ahead and do that anyway is so, or even if you've already done it, it'll be the same link. This way I have everybody grouped by class, even though, you know, looks like only 4 of my 10-person CAD class did it. They're gonna enjoy the late assignment they're gonna get for not doing that today. Anywho's. After that, you can go ahead and close, or close your site for the time being, because that's all we're going to do with it today. And we're going to bounce over and start looking, like I said, at architecture styles. Excuse me. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and start, like I said, going through the architectural styles information. There is quite a bit of stuff in here, and I'm not going to stretch this out forever. We're going to stop probably before we're done, because there's just a lot of information, and I don't even really enjoy presenting it like this anyway, so... Alright, if you were so inclined to look at the objectives we're going for here, it says to describe traditional architectural styles used in the United States, explain how social and cultural influence or ideas influence architecture, explain the historical differences, or historical design influences rather, on today's residential homes, and identify different types of multifamily dwellings. Finally, it would be describing current trends in architecture. And by the way, for you guys just on the side, I would be taking some quick notes from this. They don't have to be super detailed, but a key point of design, or not a key point of design, but key points would be good for you to recall. There will be like a knowledge check when we're finished with this, and because I guarantee you that won't be today, you'll want to be able to look back and remember some of this stuff. Besides, one thing that I have found in my life is that writing something down greatly increases the amount of retention that I have for it. So the first thing it talks about is the study of architecture and what exactly it is. The first thing it says is that it's a sensitivity to design. And what that means is essentially when you go about designing a structure, you can design a box that is sturdy and can contain a place for you to live and be sufficient to your habitation needs. But that's not technically architecture. That's just construction. When we're talking about architecture, we're also talking about the design of the thing that you're creating. Does it look good? Does it fit within its surroundings? Does it contain all of the visual elements, I suppose, that somebody would want to live in all the time. I mean, at this point in time, with the whole, pandemic lock-ins and things like that, it's really never been more important to enjoy the space in which you live. And a good architect and good architecture greatly increase that happiness within the space. Architecture also encompasses a skill in drawing techniques. So as a part of drafting, there were 1 or 2 assignments that we did, or should have done depending on the year, that involves specifically architectural assignments. The reason that I don't do a whole bunch of them in drafting, even though architecture is my favorite side of drafting, is because when you're not doing it on a computer, it is very, very tedious. For example, when we use the software that we will be using to create buildings inside or on the computer, you click on a tool, it's specifically the wall tool, and you draw a wall. In order to do that exact same thing in manual drawing or in a 2D CAD program, you would end up needing to draw a symbol that represents the siding or the brick on the outside of it, and then knowing how thick that is and drawing the back line of it, and then drawing the outer line that makes up the under laminate or the OSB sheeting, both sides of it, then the stud wall, and then the interior stuff. So you end up, you can be less complicated about it, especially if you're doing it with pencil and paper. But when you're drawing, say, for production, you have to have all of that information when you're drawing an architectural drawing. And that there is my reasoning for not focusing on it more heavily in manual drafting. But you still have to have that technique to be able to take your ideas out of your head and put it either on paper or on the computer. Once we get into our actual projects, the first thing that you will always do is sketch out a rudimentary version of whatever it is you're going to design on the computer. Gives you a reference point, a place to work from. Even if what you end up with doesn't look anything like you started, you still had that idea to evolve from on paper. So the next one down is a knowledge of construction. So you have to know what building techniques are going to go into building a structure that you've designed. Can you make a 200-foot long room that's 50 feet wide and not have any support posts somewhere in the middle of the room? The answer is yes, but you have to design everything a certain way so that is possible without it collapsing on itself. You also have to have an awareness of technological advancements. So keeping an eye towards things that are changing. One of the big buzzwords in architecture these days is green construction. And green construction doesn't mean you build everything and it's the color green. It means that it's, in this case, it specifically means that it's environmentally friendly. Does the actual construction of the home or the house that you're creating, does it blend in with its surroundings and complement the surroundings? Or do you have to clear an entire forest in order to get your structure in place and to have it look right? In addition to that, do you put solar panels on the roof instead of shingles? Does it have a draw well, or is it connected to city water? All of these things that you have to think of. Some houses anymore are specifically designed to be off the grid. They don't have an incoming water line or an outgoing sewer line. They don't have an exterior power box. They have solar panels. They don't have any type of natural gas. So these are things that you have to think about as you go, and the amount of technology that is going to go into the house. For example, I currently live in a house that was built in the 1960s. There are way too few power outlets. None of them are really up to code. There's a whole bunch of stuff that if somebody was going to build that same house today, one of the things that code says is that there has to be a power outlet every 6 feet along every wall. And also, they have to be put in, especially if they're around a window, what is essentially upside down. So when you think about a power outlet, right, you have the 2 plugs at the top and then the grounding hole at the bottom. When you're, the code says you have to put it so that the grounding hole is at the top. Any new construction within the last 10 years will have all been put in like that. But you as the designer need to know about that beforehand. And finally is the architect needs to have a good knowledge of architectural style. So what kind of house are you building? Are you doing a ranch style, a salt box, a mansard? Is it going to have a mansard roof or a hip roof, or like all of these things, and especially those terms that you probably don't know that I just rattled off, are things that we're going to talk about probably before the end of this lesson, actually. But are things that you need to know about as an architect. Now, we're going to go through these pretty quick, but essentially, we're going to start with the original styles of dwellings that were in in this region of the world, starting basically. As long as people have been here, but really we'll only start talking about things that you're going to recognize really once we get to American colonial homes. So the different types of... Here, give me just a second. Grab it. Sorry, someone at the door. Okay. Did somebody just say my name?
Yeah. Do you want us to take notes on the type of houses too?
Just know what they are.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, so the first one that we're going... What happened to the wigwam? Okay. Apparently my slideshow is missing some bits, so the first one is the wigwam. It is essentially... It's a small house that's made of wooden frames, and then it's covered with woven or grass mats. So because that is not showing up in here, let's look at a wigwam. Here we go. Alright, so this is sort more of a modernist example of what a wigwam would look like, but honestly, there aren't any traditional examples still standing. They are basically made out of twigs and branches that have been roped together and then covered with grass mats. Those grass mats would have been replaced very often, and you would get fairly wet living in one of these homes. They could be rectangular with domed roofs. They could also be oblong. Some of them were even cone-shaped. They were typically about 10 to 16 feet in diameter and about 8 to 10 feet tall, so you'd be able to stand up in one without too much trouble. And actually around here is where you would normally have found one. So here to the southern plains are the areas where you would find these types of houses. The more traditional, and what most people probably think of when you think of Native American homes, is the teepee. And there's actually a picture of one on this screen. It is mainly found in the the northern part of the American plains, so probably in the Dakotas, maybe some around here, but more aptly to be found in the more northern climates. They're designed to be easily put together and taken apart. So here, let me just tell you what it says. This is, in the North American plain regions, many Native American tribes moved often to follow bison around and other food. Their shelter had to be lightweight, easy to assemble, and easy to break down. Their main form of housing was the teepee, a cone-shaped structure covered in animal skins, usually bison hide, and it was typically about 12 feet in diameter and about 10 to 12 feet tall. This is kind of ingrained in the American psyche, or at least of what you think of when you think of a Native American home. The next one is the longhouse. These were found more in the northeastern parts of the country. There you go. They were much larger structures than either wigwams or teepees, and they were also much more sturdy and long-lasted. For example, the one in the picture here is actually at a historical site, meaning it's probably been repaired over the years, but it's very much possible that that's an original longhouse. They were rectangular, consisted of wooden pole frames, and then covered in bark or grass mats. They could be as large as 200 feet long, 20 feet wide, and 20 feet tall. They were definitely a permanent structure, and you could have as many as 60 families living in one of these. Depending on the region, it evolved into many forms. Some had thatched roofs, and thatched is where you take basically those grass mats before and you weave them together, usually in bundles, in order to create a much more long-lasting and dry roof material. Okay. Another one that a lot of people have probably seen before is an adobe house. Adobe was primarily put together by the Pueblo Indians, and you would find it most common in the southwest corner of the country. So probably Southern California, New Mexico, Nevada, and Arizona. It's a natural building material, and it's made of water, sand, clay, and straw mixed together, and then it gets basically formed into the shape that they wanted. I mean, it's almost like building a clay pot or something in art, except they did it on a scale that people lived in and had multiple stories or multiple floors. The thick walls supported a roof that was usually large timber covered in the adobe and then had dirt placed over that for insulation. And then the last one is the earthen home. And essentially, basically, well, here, let's just say, in the Great Plains and eastern woodlands, they were constructed of earth or sod. The igloo is a variation of an earthen house because they're actually using what is the ground in colder climates to create the home within which they live. They were partially built underground. The timber frame was covered with a layered system of smaller sticks, and then long grasses, woven mats, and earth. And it was common for the earth, or for the dirt to cover, or for the whole thing to be covered in sod. So it ends up looking like just a large, oddly shaped hill. Alright, so here are where you're going to start seeing styles of housing that you probably have seen in this area. There's several of them, or there's several places I can think of right now where I can see a log home, or a salt box, or a Cape Cod. We're going to get through these and then we're going to call it a day, so just bear with me. Alright, so one of the earliest type of house that was built by colonial settlers in North America is the log cabin. It was introduced in the early 14 to 1600s by the Swedish and Finnish immigrants. They generally were found in areas where forest was very prevalent. The log cabin was originally a one-room gabled roofed house built from logs, and it'll have a centrally located front door and a chimney on at least one, if not both ends. So, judging from this picture, who can tell me what a gabled roof is? And you can just type it to me if you don't want to make your voice known, but what do you think a gabled roof is? Nobody? Okay. Okay. Well, for the record, a gabled roof is a type of roof that only has two pitches. So on this picture of the log home right here, each of those planes that make up the roof only meet in that one spot at the top. They don't also angle at the ends. So a gabled roof has a gable wall, that's the triangular shaped section right here, and then two planes. Now they can get more complicated depending on the rest of the architectural style, but you never really find that in a log cabin. Excuse me. The next one is the salt box. This one started showing up around the 1700s. It has a lot more interior space, and the first one that has traditionally has more than one floor. Basically, it's a lean-to, or it's, well, not really a lean-to. The reason it's called a salt box is because when colonial settlers they would have a box that looks like this. That's where their salt was kept. Salt was a lot more important back then because you didn't have a way to cure meat other than to dry it, and you did that with salt. But anyway, you have a long, low, or steep roof side, and then a shorter one on the other side, generally coming to a 90-degree gable. And you'll have rooms up within the gable, and usually two floors as well. Design and symmetry is still a defining feature of this type of house. So on the log cabin, remember, the door was centered along the front wall. You have the same thing here. The only difference is with the salt box, the fireplace is usually also dead center within the house, or at least dead center from side to side. Now this specific one looks like it's been renovated to have a shed or of some kind on the side, but that probably wasn't original to this house. This is an example of a Cape Cod. Further advances in building techniques allowed the roof to span more than 1 or 2 rooms, allowing for a much wider floor plan. This change was really first seen around New England in the Cape Cod region, which is where it gets its name. It was built primarily by English colonists. And it's a fairly small house. It still has a gable roof, and the reason gables are seen a lot is because they're one of the easier types of roof to build. However, this particular one has what are called dormers, and the dormers are where the windows kind of poke through one of the planes of the roof and have their own gable ends. You'll see this a lot, especially on houses that have through floors. And that's basically where you're standing in the living room or one part of the house, and it's 2 stories worth of room tall, and then the dormers will contain windows with extra light showing down. You'll also see this a lot in rooms where you have what are called bonus rooms in the attic. Okay. Again, it's a very symmetrical house, and it's retained the center fireplace that you would find in the previous styles other than the log cabin. Now this one's a Tidewater. It's also symmetrical, but it comes from a very specific area in the world, or in North America. You will find Tidewaters started cropping up around the 1700s, and you'll find them along the southeastern coastline. The reason for this, and the way that they're built, is they are essentially a house on stilts. If you were to take away this basically stairway or railing that we have in the front, underneath you would see a bunch of poles holding up the main floor of the house. And generally, you could walk all the way through underneath it. The reason for this is also where it got its name. These tended to be built somewhere near the coast, and as they're about to be pounded by Hurricane Sally today. And the reason for that, the Tidewater, is so that tidal waters could go under the house without actually damaging the area where people are living. Now, these days, a lot of people will have built enclosures down in that area because the technology to keep water out has gotten much better than it was in the olden days. But you will still see a lot of these, especially on the Florida Gulf Coast. Next, we have Spanish Colonial. For this one, we have a much lower roof. It's the first time we see what are called hip roofs. And hip roofs, essentially, you take your gable, where you have the point in the center, and then you take the ends where the gable end is, so where the triangular portion is, and you slice those off at an angle as well and put a roof panel there. That's called a hip roof. There we go. Traditionally, the Spanish colonials will be covered not in logs or bricks, but with some sort of, it's not quite adobe, but plaster, giving it the same kind of look as the Spanish areas where those immigrants came from. It's a very distinctive style of house, and a very pretty one, I think, too. Oh, thick walls made of adobe brick, rubble, stone. Few windows. I don't know why this specific one has a lot of information, but the others don't. Pitched flat, or should be pitched or flat roof. And the interior and exterior walls are covered with mud or lime plaster, whitewash, or cement stucco. So that's a bit more information we'll see. Next up, we have the Georgian style. It originated in England and is named after King George's the First, Second, and Third. It comes from a very unique source. So, when this type of house started showing up in this area, in the colonies in the United States, it didn't come because people had moved from England and decided they wanted to build something that looks like home. They came from, well, they're called pattern books. So you would buy a book and it would have everything in it that you needed to build one of these houses. Essentially, it was created by the forerunners of today's architects. The publications contain treatises, essays, and books on architectural design and construction. The Georgian was the dominant style in the American colonies until the end of the Revolutionary War. It is considered to be a classical style of architecture, and interestingly enough, even though it's named after the King Georges, you don't see a lot of houses that look quite like this in England where it came from. It does mix a lot of Roman architecture styles. For example, these pillars on each side evenly spaced throughout here. It is still very, very symmetrical. Next up, we have the Federal Atom. I mean, there's not a whole lot of difference here, other than it's much less extravagantly detailed than the Georgian style was. And they are very typified by having this circular window just above the door, and they're usually mirrored down to the one below. Then here is another example of a Federal Atom. Okay, I think that's enough of me talking at you for one day, so I think that's where we're going to cut off with the presentation for now. Apparently there was a missing P somewhere because, does it say slopped? What is it? I don't know. Anywho, that's where we're going to leave off with this for today. I think I've had enough talking, and you've probably had enough listening to me. I guarantee you, and I promise you, most of our architecture classes will not be me sitting and talking at you for 20 or 30 minutes at a time. I'm hoping it'll be a little more interactive. But I do have a small assignment for you to do. Is everybody paying attention? I will get this written out and posted on Canvas here in just a few minutes. But what you are going to do is, before Thursday, I want you to sketch, basically freehand, it doesn't have to be perfect, your room. The dimensions of it, the placement of windows, doors, and primary pieces of furniture. Just do it on a piece of blank paper or lined paper is fine. But try and write down the sizes as best you can. If you don't have a tape measure, take your best guess. One way that you can kind of do some estimating is if you have a twin-sized bed. A twin-sized bed is about 80 or about 75 inches long from top to bottom. So if you use that as maybe like a measure, actually all beds until you get into like king-sized beds are about 75 inches long. Excuse me. So if you use that as a reference, you can kind of judge about how big your room is. Okay? So that is your homework from me. I will get that typed up and posted on Canvas so that you can turn it in. Oh, by the way, that brings me to something. Let me close this real quick. How you turn it in. Now, I think I mentioned this. I can't remember if I had you go through this bit last Friday. But if you scroll down to the Unit 0 Procedures section and go to the Class Procedures section inside of here, the last two videos will show you how to set up Rocketbook so that you can turn in handwritten work. So I would highly recommend that you have that that you use that. If you don't have a smartphone that you can install this app on, it's free and it's pretty small. But if you don't, you can use your Chromebook's camera to turn it in that way. But I would very much prefer that you use Rocketbook if you can, because it turns it into a PDF for me, which is much easier for me to go through using Canvas. And you all remember that. I guess all of you would have had Cam Scanner from last year too, so you can use that as well if you want. Okay?
So, I had a question.
Yeah.
You said we're supposed to draw the measurements of windows, right?
Of your, so I don't want you to be like, oh, my window or my room is 8 feet tall and my windows are 3 feet off the ground or anything like that. We're looking at, like, if you took the roof off of your room and you were looking down at it. I want just the length and the width of it, or if there are any chunky contours or anything like that in it. And then try and put the doors and the windows where they belong on the walls.
Alright.
Okay. We so tend to, when we're first learning how to use the software and go through stuff, I tend to have you all use your bedrooms just because it's probably going to be the place that you know the best. So, anywho's, I gotta stop saying that because it's very annoying and I'm driving myself nuts saying it. If you guys have any other questions, you can stick on and we'll go through it. If not, I am going to go ahead and let you all go. And you have a nice, I think it's still Tuesday. And we'll see you on Friday if I don't have you in another class. If you do have any questions, just hang out for a few minutes and I'll answer them as best I can here. Okay? Alright, bye.